Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Strength and Weakness podcast. I am Morgan, one of your co hosts, along with my other lovely co host, Ellen. And today we are welcoming you back to the second part of our podcast series where we are talking about how to handle if your child comes out to you, and now like how to support friends through a hard time. More specifically, if you have a friend who has a child that is coming out or has a family member that is coming out, how do you help them through this time that can feel so daunting and so scary? And if you're anything like me or have been in this situation before, I often want to be like, what do I do to help? How can I help? What do I do? What do I do? And sometimes we don't know what to do. And then sometimes doing things isn't really helpful. So, we're going to talk through some of those practicals today to hopefully give you some more tools in your toolbox to be able to navigate this situation. But before we do, Ellen, I would love to start with a question for you before we get into how do you handle this. But
Mhm.
how often are you talking to people in your area of profession about big moments like this? Is this something that people are often dealing with, both personally or watching a friend go through that, or how would you say this impacts people based on your experience?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the biggest things that people deal with is supporting, loving, serving people who are going through hard times. And how I would make it personal to that client would be I always say not letting it creep into your lane, right? Like we
Okay.
all have what's in our lanes, what's ours to deal with in life. And then so often we're looking at other people's lanes, people we really love and care about, and we want to carry their burdens too. And we're letting some of their lane drift into our lane. And that messes everything up. It skews us because we think that we have power where we actually don't. And
Mm,
very often that's where, enmeshment comes in or pulling away from people because we feel powerless. So, yeah, this is actually a big thing that I deal with in therapy and even for therapists ourselves, right? Like I had to learn in school, I do not have the power to take away someone's difficulty or their pain or their fear. And you really have to contend with that in becoming a therapist because if you feel like you do have that power, you will really mess up your clients and your own
mm.
practice. But if you can instead surrender that and offer what's within your lane to your clients or to your friends, right? Then you can be really effective. So yeah, this is a big thing we deal with. I call it internal boundaries, not letting things creep into your lane.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I know that I go through this daily, especially if you have kids, right? Like you want to be the savior to save them from whatever grief or hard time they're going through. But now, when I look back in reflection, I'm like, wow, I tried to save a lot of people, from hard things, and I tried to be the person who came in, and whether that was "Well, something hard is going, let me race to your house and I'll be there with you." And I don't think those things are inherently bad, and I don't think it was negative motivation, if you will, but
Uh-uh.
I do think, especially in big moments like this, you can end up getting your feelings hurt if you cross into other
Mm.
people's lanes where it's like, "Oh, you don't want my help?" Or "You weren't grateful that I was there for you," or,
Uh-huh.
something like that, and all of a sudden, what was somebody else's, big moment now is about me, right? Like, I've totally
Right.
fallen
Hijacked that.
victim to that,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, "Oh, shoot, probably shouldn't be upset about this, but, why am I feeling upset about this?" type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, you
yeah, I'm
said
excited
something
to
so important that I want to highlight that sometimes when we change this internal motivation and why and how we're supporting people, the outward action doesn't have to always change, right? Sometimes that can look the same. You do run over to someone's house or you help them in their deepest moment, but the motivation, the how makes all the difference, right? It's not necessarily about the what, it's about the how.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think too, it's really interesting um, because I think it's not only "Oh, I wanna go and, I wanna be all of this for somebody else," but I think too, you talked about enmeshment and codependency, I also find that I have some friends who lean towards being more codependent, and so in
Uh-huh.
every hard moment, I'm their first phone call,
Mm.
or there's the constant, I
Uh-huh.
don't know, it's almost as though, I am
Like an
the safety net,
expectation.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I do think, right, there's a lot of boundaries that we can reshape here and talk about as far as, okay, if you're the friend that is a safe enough place for somebody to let you in, how do you navigate that situation? How do you respond? What are some best practices? So that's what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah.
Um, so when we're talking about like big emotions, like let's start with the scenario, right? Last week we talked about, okay, if your child comes to you and says, "Hey, mom, I'm bisexual," or I have a girlfriend or I think I like a girl, whatever that is. Like how do you handle that as a parent, right? So if you haven't listened to that
Mhm.
yet, I suggest you go back. So today we're shifting the perspective of we'll say, Ellen is my friend. I have a child who comes out to me, "Mom, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm dating a girl or my son is dating a boy." And I am going to Ellen and I'm like, "What on earth is happening? How do I handle this? I've tried to do everything, the right way in responding to my child, but like I feel a mess. I don't know what to do." So Ellen's going to be like the friend. Like how should Ellen respond when I come to her and I'm like, "I need you to help me through this really big moment in my life." What would you say would be first, Ellen?
Well, first I'll say I love this vignette where we're pretending to be friends. You're like, "Imagine
Oh
that we're
yeah.
friends." This
And
is
then as I was saying
such
that, I
a
was like,
stretch.
"Oh man, I wonder if this will come into being one day." I will
Oh
probably
gosh,
call
yeah.
Ellen and be like, "What do I do?"
Or
Actually, I've
I'll
already
call
done that
you.
in life.
Yeah, or I'll call you and say, "This big thing happened. What do I do?" So, yeah, we don't have to pretend to be friends. We are friends. And if
We
we
are friends.
pretended that something big in our lives happened, I think the first thing that's great to do is to everything we experience in life, even if it's a friend's big feelings and we feel responsible for them, it's best experienced in relationship with God. That's where everything makes sense. That's where everything is balanced, right? So the best thing you can do is to process this with God. So let me give you a little visual that I use in therapy with people. Because, right, imagine I'm in therapy with someone and they're dumping all of their problems on me, all of their big emotions. It's really easy for me to start to feel like, wow, I have to do something with all of this. I have to make them feel better. I have to give them some sort of insight, right, to make them process through all of this, make sense of it. Well, I don't have that power. So when I can turn to the side, right, I envision that I turn to the side and my client is still talking to me, but it's going past me and it's hitting sometimes tell people the wall, but let's be honest, it's hitting God's chest. It's hitting his
Yeah.
arms, right? Where it belongs. And when I switch to that vantage point and I can watch what they say go past me, I no longer feel like I'm at the root of it. I'm at the center of it. I'm responsible for how they feel. Now I'm freed up to move alongside of them to then tell them what I see and what they're experiencing. So now I have a new vantage point and I can say, wow, look at this piece of pain. I can't imagine what that was like. Tell me more about it, right? Or, oh my gosh, I feel so angry when I hear about this part of your story. I can imagine how you feel. That's what we're able to offer people, really. That's the
Wow.
only power that we have is presence. But the way that we get to that presence is we have to surrender our lack of power, our helplessness. And that is best done in relationship with God. So we have to surrender that. And part of that surrender, I would say, is processing through your own grief, right? If you're my good friend, Morgan, right? If you came to me, we're going through something difficult in life, I would feel grief over what you're going through because I love you. I care about you. I care about your family. I would feel my own grief over that. And then I would feel grief over my helplessness to not be able to
Mm,
do anything about it for you, to not be able to fly to California and take care of the problem for you, right? So I
yeah.
have to, before I can turn to you in companionship, I have to turn to God and grieve that helplessness, grieve my big emotions before I can then turn to you and offer you my presence.
Yeah, definitely. And you said something too, right? Like surrendering this to God. What if your friend, your friend is like calling you in the moment? And the reason I'm thinking of this is because you have actually given this advice to me before, which is like when people come to you and they're in crisis, it is actually not the best to respond immediately. Like
Mm.
give it a cool down moment.
Yeah.
Like how do you redirect somebody back to God without sounding like a pretentious Christian person? Like I don't know about you, but I've definitely had where I'm like, I've gone to somebody with something and they're like, "Well, did you pray about that?" And I'm like,
Oof.
what?
Mm-mm. Yeah.
I know. And so like how can you do that? Right? You obviously are a person that they trust, that they came
hmm
to you with this information. But how do you I feel funny saying like make sure that they've taken it to God first, but like how do you come alongside them? And in these moments, maybe they haven't gone to God first and you are the first dumping place. What would you recommend to like make sure that they're going to the source if they are a Christian and you know that about them? How do you do that in a loving way?
Yeah, I think that's part of this grieving and surrendering process. You don't have the power to make sure that they went to God first. And I don't even know if that's, a huge consideration to begin with. I think what's important is that you go to God first. The friend helping the friend, right? The
Mm.
person in crisis is that you have the perspective. You are humbled by God's presence, knowing I have no power here. I can do nothing. So let me give you another visual that I use when I work with my clients. A lot of times I envision that we're walking down like an aisle to get married, right? They don't know this, but they're walking toward their groom, God, and I'm walking them down the aisle. Now, a lot of times while we're walking down this aisle, their focus is on me, right? And they think I have the answers. They think I can give them perspective, et cetera, et cetera. I know that I don't. So my focus is on God. I'm walking straight toward God and I'm taking their hand. And when we get there, I'm going to put their hand right in God's hand, right? I have no answers,
Mm.
no power. So as the friend who's supporting someone going through something difficult, like a child coming out, uh, I don't think you have the power to make sure that they're handling it the way they quote unquote should be, that they're going to God first. I think what you have power in is you can go to God first. You can be the example. If your eyes are fixated on God, and they're looking at you, they can't help but be redirected to God's gaze too.
Such a great point, and I think in Christian circles, it can be so we can be so quick to make sure that other people are doing it the way that we think that they should. So I love that you
Right.
pointed that out. I love that you, like, yeah, reinforce the, like, fact that we don't have power, but that we can help refocus them to God. And so you've talked a lot about, like, presence, right? Like, do you mean, like, okay, I'm gonna go, like, sit next to them? Do you mean, like, okay, call me any time of the day, whatever you're feeling? Like, what would be your best recommendation? Like, how do you walk side by side with somebody and be present with them, but not overbearing?
Yeah.
What would be your suggestion?
Yeah, well, I think it all starts with that heart level of surrendering, right? Because truthfully, we can memorize a bunch of practicals and we can measure, right? If they've called me 3 times in one day, that's okay. But if they call me a fourth, that's not okay, right? Like, we don't want to
Yeah,
measure this kind of connection based on those measurables, right? Based on those
yeah,
facts. So we want it to start with the heart, and we want to say, all right, look, I've gone to God. And sometimes we'll have to do this more than just once, have to continually go to God and say, I have no power here. All that I can offer is my presence, my companionship in this. That means I have no answers. I have no expectations on how long this takes them, on how they go about this, right? I think especially, I remember early on in my work in this field, someone reached out who was dealing with an intersex condition. That was the first time I'd ever heard of an intersex condition. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I had no answers at all. And all I said is, wow, I can't imagine what this is like. I have nothing to offer you. I have no answers for you, but I'm here with you as you're figuring this out with your doctors and with your team and with God, right? And sometimes I think that is the absolute best thing we can offer people. No answers, no perspective, no hope even that we're giving them, but just saying, I'm here with you in this. You're not alone, right? And kind of letting them run the show. And I think in that state, right, to prevent our lane from being taken over, we need to tend to our own load, right? We need to look to our own lane. So if your friend is calling you 4 times a day and don't have the capacity to answer every single time, that's okay. There's no reason to feel guilty about it. Again, when you're looking at God, when you go to God to grieve all these big emotions, God is the one that has the power to help them, not you. Whether they recognize that or not does not matter. It's not up to you to make them recognize that. You have to be the one to recognize that. If that means you can't pick up a phone call, okay, call him
yeah.
tomorrow. Send him a text that says, sorry, I didn't get to you. I'll call you back when I'm able.
Yeah. That's so great. As you're talking, I'm like, wow, this could easily be shifted to a parenting podcast because I'm like, all of these things can be applied to my small children who I
Mm,
can just watch their problems go by me instead of like absorbing all of them and then
yes.
getting angry. So, note to self if anybody else was thinking this. Um, yeah, I love that reminder about presence. And I think too, like, secondarily to presence, I think really talking about like seeing the person in their grief because when we talk about seeing something, this is actually a phrase that's really, really special to me, like being seen by somebody, because I think we have a lot of acquaintances. There's a lot of people that come in and out of our life, right? And what I have learned as I've gotten older is that the people who make space for you and space to see you and
Mhm.
who you are have become so valuable and special to me because I'm like, "Oh, wow, you don't just see me for all of the things that are on the outside. Like you see me for what's on the inside." And I know that sounds very cliche, but I do think that it's easy to love somebody when things are going well. It's easy to
Mhm.
love somebody when you're like when you're, not when you're disassociated from them, but more like, "Okay, like, you go handle your issues, and we'll just meet up and have a good time together," right? But I think what we're talking about right now is, like, loving people in the really hard moments, and so, right, like, talked about, like, grieving our own emotions, offering our presence, and now, like, getting to serve people and support them, and as we were, like, talking and brainstorming about this, like, I think about somebody who's had a new baby, right? Like, in postpartum, you are very helpless in some ways, in your first couple of weeks of recovery, and letting somebody love you by bringing you groceries, by cleaning your house. Let me tell you, there is nothing that makes me feel more uncomfortable than letting people serve me in a deep
Right.
capacity like that because they see me. They see what I
Mhm.
eat. They see what's dirty in my house. They see inside of my home, and those are things that I don't think are abnormal, but I do think it takes a lot of trust and the willingness to let people in. And so I think, right, as we're talking about how to love somebody through this process, when we're looking at a friend who may be going through a hard time, sometimes I have found, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but if I'm like, "Hey, can I bring you groceries?" They're like, "No, it's fine," right? Like, there's the
Right.
immediate defensiveness.
Mhm.
What I have found, both being a recipient and also doing it for other people, is like, "I'm actually just gonna go buy you some groceries and drop them off at your doorstep," or, "I'm just going to send you a Venmo for you guys to eat out," or,
Mhm.
"I'm just going to come over and clean your house," whatever that might look like. But it really is doing the hard stuff that isn't pretty, and you might not get a thank you, and you might not get any recognition, and there's no expectation, but you're, like, really seeing them and loving them during this really hard time.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, think about it even, right? Jesus said he was a servant leader, and what did he do? He washed his disciples' feet. That is the most disgusting thing I'm sure he could have thought of, right? He's like, "What is the grossest task that these people are gonna have to do today? It's wash their feet. Let me do it for them," right? So, in the same
Yeah,
way, I think we're called, what is in our lane is, like you said, certainly to see people. That's a service in and of itself. I think that's something to sort of accentuate our presence in their life, right? All we have to offer is presence and maybe a few practicals like serving. But in order to let them know that we are present with them, we can strive to see them. And that's when we can, think about that visual again, where we're turning to the side, we watch what they're saying, what they're feeling go past us. That puts us in a position, in a perspective to be able to see them, not to take it away,
yeah,
not to give them, the answer, not to point them toward God even, but just to say, wow, here's what I see in what you're saying. You're feeling this way. You feel this kind of pain. I can imagine what that feels like. Just letting them know, right?
yeah,
Seeing them doesn't just mean seeing them internally in your own mind and heart. It means communicating with them enough to be able to let them know that even though you don't see them perfectly, you are striving to see them through the lens of someone who loves them deeply. Because that presence with God is the only place where we feel fully seen, 100%
yeah,
seen, fully seen, known, and loved, right? Connected with God. That's what can heal anyone.
yeah,
We can't offer that perfectly to our friends who are going through difficult moments, but we can try by saying, "This is what I see in you. This is, if I
yeah,
were to perch my heart up in heaven with God, sitting on a cloud, dangling our feet below, looking down at you and this problem that you're having, this is what I see alongside God." That can do so much healing more than we realize. We really don't put enough weight on what that does in our relationships. We want to do more, right? So I would say the biggest thing we can offer is presence and striving to see someone. That all takes place on a heart-based level, and that requires our surrender before God. But I think you're right, on a practical level, there are some things that we can do. We can't take away the problem, right? We can't like meet with their kid who's just come out and, make them communicate better with their parents or whatever, but we can send them some groceries. We
yeah, yeah,
can, send them a dinner. And I think you're right. Let's not just say, "Hey, if you need anything, I'll be here." Let's just do it. If it's on your
yeah,
heart, if you've brought this before God and you've processed through this at God's feet, and you say, "God, how can I serve and support these people? My friends whom I love, and I feel so helpless here." And you've decided how you're going to serve, just do it. Don't wait for their permission.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting. I love to bake sourdough, and I've started to realize that, like, just bringing people a loaf of sourdough when they're not expecting it, right? Like, it just goes so far because you have no
Yeah,
idea what it is that they're feeling or going through, but, like, being able to give gifts, um, because God is prompting you it's so fulfilling in, like, a
yeah,
selfish way, right? I'm like, "Oh, this is so awesome. I love doing this," but it is, it's such a gift, you know?
yeah.
Um,
Let me give a
okay, so good.
practical, like one
Oh, yeah.
specific practical how to let's say you do have a friend whose child has just come out and you're like, "What can I do? Groceries don't seem like it's really gonna help them specifically with this problem that they're having." You could pay for a year's membership for them for strength and weakness or a session to meet with me, right? To kind of orient them to this new big thing that they're navigating. So there are things out there. You could buy a copy of my book and send it to them, right? Like there are things out there
Yeah.
that are specific to this field. But even if you don't want to get something specific to this field, chances are those parents are going through a huge grief journey right now and a very complicated grief journey because there's no time off of work. Nobody's bringing them meals because their kid just came out, right? There's no funeral
Mhm.
to plan, no cards, sympathy cards being sent their way. It's a very
Yeah.
complicated kind of grief. So, actually, those practical things in life, sending groceries, cleaning their house, right? Those things are much more helpful than you realize.
Yeah, and I think along those lines too, right? I mean, most people listen to a podcast or read a book. I mean, the one we just did was, like, on your child coming out. So if a friend, doesn't have a lot of knowledge around this topic, that is a great place to start, is by sending these resources because
Mhm.
the truth is they're probably asking themselves the question of, like, "Well, what do I do?" Practically, like, what do I
Yeah,
do? And so, we wanna be able to give suggestions on both, like, okay, on the topic itself and then in life, how do you support them through this time?
right.
So wrapping up, I think, the last thing that I would recommend and that, when we're thinking about supporting somebody, supporting a friend through this, right? We wanna talk about prayer. We wanna talk about praying both together, praying by yourself, and I think what you were just talking about, Ellen, like, really lends itself directly into this, which is if we are in a place where we are, like, humbled before God, if we are at a place where we have acknowledged our powerlessness, then really, like, the most powerful thing we can do is pray because we are continuing to put our emotions, our grief at the feet of Jesus and put our friend and their family at the feet of Jesus, which will do more than anything that we could offer in the physical realm,
Yeah.
to continue to provide them support.
And I think it's a great way to strive to see them too, right? Like if your child had just come out and I knew, the some of the emotional stuff you were going through, I would take you as such a precious part, friend, a precious part of my life, a precious part of God's creation, and I would put you right at God's feet and say, "God, you love her and her family even more than I do, and you want what's best for them. What do you see in them?" Right? When we
Yeah,
pray, we're kind of forced to touch perspectives with God's perspective, touch base with a heavenly perspective. And me looking at you as a fellow human, a little helpful, but not very. But me looking at you through the eyes of heaven, much more helpful,
yeah,
right? When I can see
yeah,
you through that lens. So praying, it's not just about, right, like, let me pray fervently so that you change this, problem that they're having in their lives. I think what's even more helpful is saying, God, let me put this precious problem, this precious friend of mine at your feet. Let me strive to see her and her family through your eyes. And that's how I can best offer presence and see her and see them and offer my presence in that way. And I think you can get some good practicals as to how you can serve in that way too from God's perspective. So, when we're sitting up with God on that cloud with our feet dangling below and we're striving to really look at the people that we love through his eyes, the good news is that God has already given us a template for how to look at them through his eyes, through the eyes of love, right? God is love. And 1 Corinthians 13 kind of spells out for us what that will look like even in relationships. It says, love is patient, love is kind, doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not proud, it doesn't dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, right? We talked about that. It's not about you, it's about God and their relationship. It's not easily angered, doesn't keep records of wrong, it doesn't delight in evil, rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So we have this template of the lens with which we should be looking at our loved ones who are going through these difficult moments. And I love that in First Corinthians 13, as God gives us this template, it kind of finishes with an encouragement for those of us walking alongside others going through a difficult time. It says, love never fails. I think that's the best thing that we have to offer our loved ones who are going through difficult moments is simply our love, our presence, seeing them. And though we might say the wrong thing, we might do the wrong thing, right? God promises that if we strive to love with this heart, this First Corinthians 13 heart, it will not fail because it's striving to do it through his eyes.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Well, we hope that you enjoyed our podcast today, and whether you're going through something yourself or you're helping a friend go through the big moment in their life, we hope that this podcast is helpful to you, and that you can share it someday with somebody else as they are supporting other friends. And we'll see you back next time.